Hi, welcome to the AKF channel. I'm John Michael, and today we have what they call a Sales Enablement Leader, or SEL, Mr. Russell Lloyd. Russell, how are you today?
Doing wonderful. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Any day employed is a day worth celebrating.
Absolutely. And on the right side of the grass. Right?
On the right side of the grass. So, let's get right into it. So, when did you find out about your diagnosis, and how did you feel about it afterwards? Did you feel limited? Did you feel stereotyped or branded in any kind of a way? Did you feel there was no escape from it, et cetera, et cetera?
So I have a kind of a two-part answer to that question. So how did I find out about my diagnosis? Well, officially I found out...
There was like 5 different questions in this one question.
Yeah,
so
a two-part answer is rather efficient. So I found out about my formal diagnosis in 2010 from a doctor at Stony Brook University in New York, right? So I went through the whole battery of testing at my own expense. It was like $3,000, and I got my diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. But there was a reason I went for that. And the reason is I really learned about my diagnosis from watching my first 2 kids grow up. Right? So in my childhood, I thought I was just weird, bad, uncooperative, and just some being discrete from the rest of the world. Right? Once I had my first kid and I was watching him grow up, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, during those times, I was watching him. I was recognizing somebody, and it was myself. Yeah, the way he behaved, the way he thought, the actions he took, the way he learned and interacted or didn't with the world were reminding me. I was almost a carbon copy of myself. So I had lived until the age of 30, 31, just thinking I was really weird or really rotten at certain things or really different for some unknown or unknowable reason. And he got his diagnosis of autism at around 22 months. And that's really when I knew, wait a second, I'm watching myself grow up here, almost a carbon copy. And at that moment, I realized I was autistic. And of course, in 1970, I was born in 71, right? 75 and 76 and 77 and 78, if you weren't extremely autistic, for lack of a better term, if you weren't completely dysfunctional, then there was no spectrum about it. You were just thrown in with the emotionally disturbed kids, with the violent kids, and even then there was no spectrum on that, right? I mean, we don't refer to kids as emotionally disturbed or violent anymore, right? We look at root causes and we look at treatment, right? And we look at potential mainstreaming and integration as ultimate conclusions to any therapeutic trajectory. So I had no therapy. I had no help. It was just, this kid needs to be segregated. This kid is bad. This kid needs to spend almost every night in his room with the door shut. And all of that resolved once I realized, wait a second, I recognize this. So in 2010, going for my official diagnosis was just that piece of confirmation, right? I just didn't want to be self-diagnosed. I'm not a doctor. So I went for that diagnosis, and that really provided the validation icing on the cake.
So tell us about any support you may have received. You just said that you haven't really received very much of it, but tell us about any support at all that you may have received from family, school, recreation for your special needs, if you received any at all, and how it's helped. How did it help?
So, and that's a great question. And the truth is, I didn't receive any formal supports. There just weren't any, right? I remember back in kindergarten, I slept through most of kindergarten. I would fall asleep in class. I would be paying absolutely no attention. I remember my teacher, Sharon Levin, calling on me and asking me a question about the alphabet or a number or a color or a shape or something like that, and being totally just at that moment brought back into the world, right? And I remember being brought to the principal's office and threatened with special ed. They thought that I just wasn't following along. But then my parents started to explain that he had this stuff when he was 2. Right? And my father actually has tape recordings of me doing basic arithmetic and reading at the age of 2. So it went from special education to let's get this kid tested for some type of gifted program. And I went into a gifted program called the Astor program in Brooklyn and struggled there. And of course, I struggled scholastically because I was absolutely struggling with everything else, right? With the entire social aspect of life, with the entire social aspect of school, and with the amount of stress that can place on somebody with no way to interact with the world and who's being given no tools to do so. It makes success in any other area of life pretty difficult. I would spend time being taken out of class and playing chess with guidance counselors. I remember doing that a lot, playing chess with the principal.
Did you win most of the time?
I won a lot of the time, but I'm not sure how hard my opponent was trying. And that was about it. I mean, there just wasn't any help. So I was left to feel just different to the point of exasperation, right? And we can talk about this more later, but really just developed this sense that the rest of the world was like a movie that I was watching, right? And I would watch other kids doing these weird things. I mean, just whether it's in class or in the playground, this jumping around and yelling and screaming at each other, and they'd have little fights, and then they'd interact some more, and they'd build things and then knock them over and build them again and knock it over and build it again. None of this stuff made sense to me. I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know what they were attempting to accomplish. So my early childhood through kind of the beginning of my teenage years was really just kind of like watching hamsters in a cage at the pet store, right? There was me, and then there was this whole other world that I just couldn't understand and couldn't touch. And the reason is that there just wasn't help back then. All there was separation.
Yeah, it really affects your identity as a person.
Indeed.
For sure. So, what are some challenges that you'd say that you receive as an autistic adult on a regular basis?
So, another great question, right? It kind of follows up from my previous discussion. So, the challenges were integrating with the world. The challenges were having any peer relationships, right? I enjoyed adult conversation, right? When I was at family's house and there were other small children, when they went off to play with whatever objects they can find somewhere in a corner, which didn't appeal to me, I sat with the adults listening to them and trying to contribute. The problem is when you're 7, that's seen as precocious, so you're sent away. So now you have no environment. I can't hang with the grown-ups. I have no idea how to interact with these other bizarre creatures that are, at this point, like throwing little things at each other and laughing about it. So where do I end up? I end up in a corner by myself, playing with my shoelaces, or watching the ceiling fan, or thinking of something else interesting. So, and really could unpack those years to a great deal. Maybe we save that for another time. Currently, what are my challenges? Well, my challenges are still social interactions. Now, I spent a lot of time getting really, really good at making people think that I'm neurotypical. Because the truth is, you have to do that to get by or to get ahead in this world, right? For example, being able to get through a work day, especially when we were in the office, all right? And I just as an aside, what COVID has done for working from home, people like me, I'm sure there's others in my position who feel that the world has improved for them as a result of being able to work from home so much. But back to the original topic. Getting into an office and walking down the hall in the morning and somebody saying to you, "Hey, what's up?" I know they're not really interested. I know they don't want to know what's up. I know they don't really want to know how my night was or how my weekend was or what's going on. If I actually stopped them to tell them, within about 10 seconds, they'd start squirming and want to get away. Right? So I had to realize they're not really looking for an answer to that question. What they're looking to do is to satisfy a social norm that you don't just blow past somebody in the hallway without acknowledging them. So I had to develop rote responses to these questions. What's going on? Oh, not much. You? What's going? How's it going? It's going. How was your weekend? Good. Yours? Right? And so I worked on that and worked on that and practiced that until I could pull it off so that I could walk past somebody in a hallway without them wondering, why did he just ignore what I said and blow past me? Right? Because the issue with that is then you develop a reputation of, what's up with this guy? Why doesn't he answer questions? Does he think he's better than everybody else? And people generate all these suppositions about you. Right?
Preconceived notions.
Absolutely. So you really have to nail some of these rote events, right? To go to another side, though, let's talk about something like a business dinner. Now, I have no problem in meetings. I never really had a problem in meetings because you've got a strong agenda, you've got a subject matter. I'm in there because I'm a subject matter expert. I can speak to my stuff. All right? The problem was after a day of meetings, the dinner. Okay, everybody, we'll meet back in the hotel lobby at 6 o'clock. And for those who didn't have to fly here and have their cars, we'll carpool to the restaurant, right? And of course, you end up at 6 o'clock in the lobby. Everybody's late. So now you're drinking beers at the hotel bar. Then you've got to ride in somebody else's car with 2, 3, 4 other people to a dinner where you're going to wait half an hour for a table socializing at the place's bar. And then you're going to sit down, you're going to order, you're going to eat, and you're going to get more drinks. And after about 4 hours of this, I am completely exhausted.
Drained.
Absolutely drained. It took a long time to learn how to pull it off. And of course, what's the it here? The it here is pretending I am interested in the lives of everybody else at the table. Going through the quid pro quo of them telling me something about them, and now I have to tell them something about me, right? And sharing life with people that I intend never to see or speak to outside of the office. Right? I never played poker with people from work. I never had them over to my house, all right, with one rare exception. They don't belong in my house. The work people are at work. They belong in the hallways there. They don't belong in my dining room. They don't belong in my kitchen. They don't belong in my basement. And they don't belong in my backyard. So I always had that separation, and I like it that way. But that dinner, by the time I got out of there, and I always made sure I wasn't the first to leave, but I was always the second. Because the first to leave, you develop a reputation. Why is he leaving? Why, he doesn't think he needs us? You know, the way neurotypical people think, right? And then that spirals out of control. So I would always be the second to leave, and I would get back to my hotel room and I would actually not be able to fall asleep because I'd have to make sure to take 4 hours to recover from this dinner. And what am I recovering from? I'm recovering from the amount of energy it takes to behave that way, to behave normally for that stretch of time. So nobody wonders what's up with this guy. And recovering from that is something that really takes me days, especially if the effects are cumulative. So that's my truest challenge, right? The challenge is in the recovery, right? And I think it's very important for other people with autism watching this. Make sure to protect your recovery, right? My family knows if I am on the patio, alone, in silence, leave me there because I'm there for a reason, right? I'm probably there recovering, including I'll be recovering from this, right? Why? Well, it going to be challenging about talking into a camera. I've met both of you for the first time, right? So tapping into all the scripts in my head and all the logic branch situations and making sure I always have a response that is typical and therefore acceptable and therefore allows events to proceed as most people expect them to, that takes a tremendous amount of energy, and that's what that recovery is for.
Well, hopefully this experience with us is... Would you describe your social interactions with people as primarily positive? And I know, like you said, that you've had, you know, a lot of limitations on like interactions with people, but do you feel at times that there are genuinely positive social interactions that you've had? Do you feel included in a group, or do you constantly feel excluded, never truly belonging in the world that you're in, you know, stuff like that? And I know that that's the case sometimes, but most of the time, what would you say?
So let's start with positive interactions. I have lots of positive interactions. And of course, we all get to define what the metrics are around positive, right? My interactions are not designed to develop a buddy that I'm going to go have beer with and that I'm going to have to my house to watch a football game with, right? My interactions are designed to accomplish an objective, right? So if my objective is advancing some cause at work, I know how to engineer positive reactions. If my objective is to establish relationships that can help me with my charitable giving, right? As a mentor or as somebody who facilitates conversations with autistic adults or their parents, I can establish the relationships and the connections that move that objective forward, and therefore I consider that interaction positive. So for me, positive is, did I have an interaction that moved the needle on the accomplishment of a goal? And yes, I have many of those types of interactions.
Fabulous. What would you do different if you had a child, and of course, obviously you do, that has had the same special needs that you once had or have?
Well, I mean, putting things in context, right? When I had my children, we had advancements in thought that we just didn't have when I was their age, right? In the mid-70s, right? We had the IDEA law, we had the concept of every child being granted a FAPE, right, a free and appropriate public education. We had IEPs, individualized education programs, and 504s, which are kind of IEP lights. So there was already a context and a structure, right? What I did, well, and of course there was additional context because I was recognizing something, right? So there was no chance I was going to just see my kid as difficult, stressful, bad, uncooperative, right? What I did is a great deal of research, right? Of course, I also had the internet, right? By 2001, 2002, I had the internet, right? So I did a great deal of research. By the time my oldest was 9 months old, I knew exactly what the situation was, right? But unlike other parents, I also knew all the tests that needed to be done. I knew the genesis of those tests. I knew how they were developed. I read the white papers involved in the research for the tests. When I took my kid to the doctor, the pediatrician wasn't able to tell me, oh, he's just a late bloomer, don't worry about it, right? I also wasn't going with an agenda of, please don't tell me there's anything wrong with my kid, right? A lot of parents, they go with that. They argue with somebody who says, there might be an issue here. No, absolutely not. There's nothing wrong here. Matter of fact, I just need to get a different doctor. That's what's wrong here. So armed with a great deal of knowledge, a great deal of assertiveness, we had both our first two children diagnosed before their second birthday. So what did that enable? That enabled an extraordinarily aggressive early intervention program. That enabled literally, I would say, 4,000 hours of therapy during their first 5 years of life.
Prevent what happened to them that happened to you.
Well, to get them a jump on it, I had to teach myself this stuff by studying people and studying certain books. And by the way, if anyone wants to start somewhere, an old book you can find on eBay called How to Read a Person Like a Book. It's illustrated, and it's a kind of a gateway book to analyzing facial expressions, analyzing body positioning, and analyzing hand positioning to understand what other people are thinking. It was written, I think, in the 50s or 60s, and it's a wonderful place to start. But back to my kids, they had this extreme early intervention. They had somebody who was doing a lot of research, who knew a lot, who's assertive, who's a speaker, who couldn't be bullied out of services by governments and by school districts. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. So they had every single edge, right? And then again, when we were hiring, so they were sending OTs, they were sending PTs, they were sending speech therapists, they were sending ABA therapists. Your average parent, they don't understand these disciplines, right? I'm on the other side. I happen to be a good researcher. I happen to be able to remember what I read, right? I happen to be able to absorb a lot of information and connect the dots and find the patterns that tell the story in them. So I'm thinking, well, how am I going to tell if I have a good ABA therapist, right? I mean, there's so many ABA therapists. How do I know if I have a good one? I guess I've got to teach myself ABA therapy, right? And 6 months in, you could have at that point taken me, put me in a room and said, take data, and I could do it. You wouldn't know I wasn't an ABA therapist. And so I did the same for speech therapy. And so I did the same for occupational therapy. Because I had to be able to assess, do we have competent people? Do we have the right people, even if they're confident, that are appropriate for the way that my children interact? Are we using anti-aversive, right, ABA therapy? Are we avoiding the use of food as rewards? So what my kids had is the support of a father and mother with a tremendous knowledge base, a great degree of assertiveness, and the realization that while everyone else was out there going, Don't tell me there's something wrong with my kid. And certainly don't label them. Well, if you label them, that'll follow them around and it'll handicap them. And we're saying, without that label, your kid is not going to get the services they need. So we were on the other side, taking everything. We'll take all the labels. We'll take all the tests. We'll take all the evaluations. We'll take all the therapy that's in your budget. And they had that advantage.
Fabulous. So if you had the chance, what advice would you give to parents who have autistic children? What's some things that you wish that they knew?
For parents, it is definitely get moving quickly. Realize that you need to educate yourselves around what this is. Realize that you need to find allies. All right? And this, I'm not just talking about your friends and family. I'm talking about professionals. Make sure no one's telling you what you want to hear. And that means analyzing what you yourself think you want to hear. Because so often it's, everything's going to be fine. Boys sometimes don't talk or point or babble until they're 3. If you know in your heart that something is off track, right, it needs to be put back on track. And you've got to find professionals who are willing to work with you and to make progress with you and aren't themselves slowing you down. That's something I would absolutely tell parents.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And then, well, that's all the time we have for today. We'll see you next time for more of the same.
What?
Bigger, better stuff next time?
I guess.
He's awesome. More stuff just like him next time. We'll go with that.